No, you didn't like calling because you
Didn't
don't
like
want to
calling.
make
So, and
decisions
this was
later,
making
right?
life easier. It was making life
Exactly.
easier.
You don't want to make decisions. You can't be a good
Yeah.
poker player if you don't want to
Yeah.
make decisions. You have to make decisions to be a good poker player. Ladies and gents, welcome back to the return of From Losing to Cruising. Mark, welcome back into the Carrot Poker Studios. You've been out battling for a week. How has that week gone?
You can see the chart here, not particularly well, Pete. So I'm looking forward to getting some feedback today.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the most unlucky starts to a coaching experiment ever. Like, we've definitely not ran well since we began this journey. But it will turn around, and we will continue to fix massive leaks in your game, and once we've patched up the bigger ones, it will be harder and harder for this kind of thing to keep happening to you. Any general observations on how you moved on from the previous session, in which we discussed folding a bit more in the river, making more exploitative folds, and just getting away from the stationary psychological leaks that were holding you back?
Yeah, I did some meditation on it and I found that helpful. It put it at the front of my brain. So I think I found some folds that I wouldn't have found before. I may have overcorrected a little bit in some places, so there's a little bit of calibration I think required. But
Mm-hmm.
in a way, I'm happy. I'm happy to overdo it to prove to myself that I can do it, if
Yeah,
that makes sense. And then I can pull it back from there more easier than it is to take the step of actually folding
yeah,
with a strong
absolutely.
hand.
I
Yeah.
think it's really good if you even, as long as you engage with the specifics of a hand, even if you are overdoing it, just being able to show yourself that you can conquer the mental affliction and be more okay with the feeling of losing a pot to a player who may or may not be bluffing you, I think that's a massive hurdle. And if we can get over that obstacle, then we can then calibrate and more finely tune from there, as long as we don't defer to some really general, like, I need to fold more so I fold thing in spots without engaging. As long as we engage with each specific situation, I'm happy. Okay, so that sounds positive.
Right.
Let's move on to analyzing some back-to-back stackings. We are going to look at the car crash today of your biggest losing pots, and we're going to see where it was your fault, where it wasn't your fault, and where it is your fault, what can we do about it to improve your game. So let's go. Guys, I really think that poker has been a badly taught subject for a long time. So many courses, training sites out there that give you an absolute medley of different random content day after day. There's no structure, there's no organization. You're jumping from one thought to another by following along with a live play session. There's almost nothing that's created in a pre-prepared academic way, and that's why I was so incentivized to bring you the Carrot Poker School. Not only do we use presentations to make sure that all ideas are actually translated into concepts, figures, graphics, and hand examples, and give you the right amount of each, but we also make sure that the syllabuses of our courses flow from episode to episode, not moving at a pace that you guys can't handle. The Carrot Poker School is fully comprehensive. It takes you from the start to the end. By the time you've completed grade 3, there's really nothing that you don't know about the theory of cash game poker. This is so much more efficient than just watching training content from a subscription site that bombards you with random stuff every day. Carrot Poker School will make sure that you learn at the right pace and that there's absolutely nothing missing in your game. We do not bombard you with extra information that you don't need. We just give you everything you need, and that's a lot, and that's why the Carrot Poker School is 33 hours long. We lead you down the path to success gradually and carefully, making sure that you get feedback every step of the way. This is a revolutionary course, guys. I'm incredibly proud to have brought it to you. You can check it out over at carrotcorner.com. You can save £500 today by picking up our full scholarship and learning cash game poker the right way. All right, hand number 1, I'll take us through the pre-flop action here, and then we'll get your thoughts post-flop. As always, we have 6s on the button. We go for a 3-bet, which seems standard. I think you told me before that you don't build a calling range on the button against cutoff, which is the same thing that I do, so I approve. Villain 4-bets, and yeah, I think we probably do have mostly a call here. I'd imagine this one is quite close, but in position with one of these lower pairs. I mean, yeah, I guess it's a medium-sized, not a massive 4-bet, so I think peeling this looks okay to me. Any reads on the player? Was this a reg, recreational? Any thoughts?
This was a reg, so he was 26, 22, 11 over
Okay.
about 6 hands, so pretty reg. I think at 100 big blinds, I'd probably fold this, but a little bit deeper, I thought I had a little bit better to be set mining.
Yeah, I mean, It's not just a set mine, right? You can definitely survive heads up with a pair of sixes on lots of textures. While set mining is the biggest ingredient of your EV, you wouldn't want to think about this as just set mining, because if it was, then it would never be profitable to call, because you'd never be making 10 times your investment back from the pot on average. Here we go ahead and peel, and I think calling and folding here are both relatively close. The smaller this 4-bet gets, the more likely it is that calling is just winning. It will also depend on, you know, how you play post flop as well. So 4-bet pots are kind of a weird area because, like, while they're massive, they don't come up very frequently. Villain goes for a bet here, we decide to jam. Let's get your thoughts on this play. What were you thinking at the time, and what do you think about your thought process now?
Yeah, at the time I thought this is a hybrid hand, obviously. It's, yes, he has over pairs, but I just thought if I'm behind with a shove, I have outs to beat over pairs. So I think this way is maybe a cleaner way to just getting the equity that my hand has.
Okay, so there's a few things to unpack here. One, hybrid hand means that in the Carrot Poker School, we teach hybrid hands a lot in Grade 2, and we talk about how they are hands which benefit from multiple reasons for making aggressive investments, right? So when you invest aggressively with sixes here, there's an element of value. There's also a large element of denial. So the denial part comes from villain folding like his ace king, king queen, king jack, whatever that may be, ace queen, just the random 4-bets from pre-flop. Ace 4, which is great. Those hands do have a decent amount of equity, and making them fold is going to be good overall. Then we have the thought of value, which basically comes from villain either calling off something like a flush draw, which we're significantly ahead of here, or something like, well, not significantly, but we're decently ahead of a flush draw, I guess, compared to normal with the extra straight outs if they hit a pair and stuff like that. And then there comes the fact that if we do hit a 6, 9, or 4 later, that's part of our equity, it's part of our EV, and we're going to be in okay shape against like over pairs here and stuff as well. So yeah, I think this play is probably very GTO approved and is completely fine. You're a bit deeper than normal, which might make it slightly more dubious, but I still think it's going to be okay. I'm not sure about the cleaner part. I didn't really follow what you meant with that, and I think like one of the things I want to do with you on this journey, and I'm seeing this more and more as I both work with you on screen here on the YouTube series and also as I talk to you, you know, in the Discord group and look at your hands there, is this idea that there are some thoughts you're having that are a little bit like, I don't know, subordinate to the theory that we're learning and kind of unnecessary and borderline misleading at times. And I wonder if like a cleaner way to get my equity is one of those thoughts, because like you're in position here, you can call any turn bet at all. Like, why is this cleaner if you're always realizing equity by calling turn bets as well? You know what I mean? I don't really get it. It's cleaner in the sense that you don't have to make further decisions, and those decisions are gonna burden you. So do you think there could be an element of trying to make life maybe more comfortable for yourself or easier for yourself in this spot, and that might actually be irrelevant to EV? Is there any of that going on?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's definitely possibly an issue, yeah.
Because I don't think there's anything wrong with the jam, but I think that kind of mechanism could cause bad jams and like bad aggression in certain spots. So I'd like you to be really vigilant for that and try to spot that when it comes up and try to overrule it next time you have that kind of desire. Jam's okay here for the reasons that we've talked about, but the cleaner part of it does make me wonder, like, are we sometimes over-aggressing in spots just to make life simpler when really we should just be embracing the decisions to come? I think trying to clarify poker for yourself and try to simplify it is like a very common leak for someone of your level. It's very tempting, but it's one that we should fight against and resist. Okay. So this hand, I don't have a big problem with this at all. I think this is fine. It's just an unfortunate stacking. It's going to happen, but some food for thought there for sure with the analysis. Ace King, cold 4-betting, facing a jam. Again, we're like a little bit deeper here. Positionally, it's hijack, button, small blind. It's going to be one of these really close spots. I would maybe look up the EV of this if you have like a pre-flop sim, like on simple pre-flop or something, and look it up at 100 big blinds. At 100 big blinds, it won't be a fold. But if it's very marginally winning as a call, then it may become a fold at this kind of stack depth. But I think this is super close to break even. It might become a fold though when you reach like 120, 130 just in these positions. If you were like under the gun against button, against small blind here or something. And what we should note is that it's not actually the 3-better, it's the opener that's jammed. They really don't have a lot of incentive to do that with this player behind. This is kind of dicier than you would think. There are definitely worlds where this hand is just a fold, and I'm not super happy here being deeper. I think 100 BBs, it's close. I think I'd probably fold at this stack depth, and I know that feels shitty, But you need to understand that when you cold 4-bet ace king off here, it's not a value cold 4-bet, it's actually just more of a hybrid again, that you have some equity, you'll survive if called, you have good blockers to the jamming range, and you have fold equity, and all of those things together make this a good 4-bet. But by the time that you've been jammed on by the opener, not even the 3-better, I think here, and you're deeper, I think here it might be time to recalibrate. So in game, were you anywhere near folding here, or were you just in a mode where you were always going to call because it's ace?
I think it felt very close. I felt that I get shown kings and aces a lot here, but I also felt that he does have ace king at times as well. So I that's what I thought the range was kings plus ace king.
And there may be some queens in there too. Some of the ace king may just flat the 4-bet or something, or fold sometimes, we don't really know. But overall, I think it's likely that if the range is queens plus ace king only, then you need 39%. Well, yeah, but it's barely a call. And if you start removing some of those, because against queens plus ace king, you'll have about 40% equity, right? Like something like that, maybe like 42%.
Yeah.
If you start removing some of those queens and ace king combos, it very quickly moves towards the fold, right? But not a huge deal. I'm not overly concerned with this one. So here we make a deviation, agreed, from like a normal pre-flop game plan with threes. This would normally be a fold. So reasons for this?
Well, there are times when against facing an early position, let's say low jack or hijack open, I will set mine in position if I think that the players in the blinds aren't overly aggressive, so that I'll get to realize, I get to see a flop and set mine with threes. That's and the 3 big blind open is a sign of a weaker player, so that was my reasoning.
Okay, yeah, I think that's all very reasonable. I think it also comes down to having a skill edge post-flop, and it also comes down to basically as you say, the players behind you, their stack depths, how often they're squeezing, that kind of thing. I don't have a big problem with this. I would again advise against the word set mine, because it does paint a bit too black and white of a picture of what's going on post-flop. You are right that it's mostly to set mine, but I don't know, I think again, we should just understand that there are other scenarios that happen where this player folds, the flop is 8-6-4, villain checks, we bet, villain folds. Like, that happens a lot as well, right? So there's loads of ways you win the pot without making a set here. If you were only set mining, again, it would never be a good proposition, because you're not making 10 times your investment on average every time you make a set. Like, of course not, right? You don't make 30 big blinds on average with a set here and such a small pot. So you need to have other ways of winning the pot as well. Okay, easy call, absolutely fist pump call here, no problem. Flop a set, half pot, jam, going all in. Yeah, I mean, let's just, they love it when they don't like it when I skip results. So YouTube, this is for you. I don't care, Mark doesn't care. He doesn't want to see it again, but this is for you. I don't want to see it again. No. This is fine, this is fine. Okay, cold 4 again. This is the thing, when we start looking at like these big pots, we do see a lot of forced investments. Like, I have a set I have to stack off, I have ace king, I'm putting money in. That's okay though, because we are doing a health check today, and we're making sure that these times you're losing lots of money, that you're not, you know, butchering loads of hands, that you are just running bad. That's what we're kind of checking in with. So
yeah, like, I mean, is call there okay? Rather than, like, I felt like I didn't want to shove that.
I mean, you can certainly shove. I mean, you can call. I think either play is probably similar EV at equilibrium. It doesn't really matter. Why did you not want to shove?
Because I felt it was a strong. Yeah, I felt it was maybe just a tight range. I need to just check what the villain was, whether that had any impact on my decision. Yeah, villain was 20. He hadn't played many hands, but it was 23, 15, 0. But
I mean, if that's a small sample, you probably, how many hands? It's
only a small sample. It's only a small sample, so I don't think that was an issue. I just felt versus a cold 4-bet, and maybe it was that I'd just been stacked a few times and I didn't want to kings again, so there could have been a form tilt there as well.
I mean, I think call is reasonable. I think the spot actually gets incredibly close to 0, like if you're against someone that's under bluffing. Like, it should be profitable comfortably here to shove. This is very different when you're the 3-better and it's background to you, rather than like you're this guy and the 3-better still to act with an uncapped range. That's what we saw the player do before, right? So here there's no issue jamming ace king in theory. The reason there's no issue is that there's plenty of bluffs in there. If this is someone who may have like no bluffs, or is like trending really passive, like in a scary way, it's possibly okay to actually pitch here right away. Like, if you're against someone really tight, I know that's like blasphemous and it's ace king, but it's a cold 4-bet against a tight fish. Like, pitching is totally fine, like completely. I don't have an issue with it. Call is an adjustment I would make if I was a bit concerned, but not overly. And maybe say, I don't want to fill, I'll just call. And then if I was against like a normal reg here, I would mostly just jam. because you're not meant to be doing well when you jam and get called in this sort of spot. You're just cleaning up fold equity, and the pot's very big already. There's lots of dead money, so you can take being a slight underdog after the money goes in if you have a lot of fold equity that you're generating here and you're blocking your opponent's, biggest hands, so it's fine. Yep, check call is lovely here. I wouldn't really be building much raise in this spot. I don't think there's much point. Villain's very polarized already here. Yeah, I mean, I doubt GTO would ever fold here. I think it would be a very exploitative fold to make. Yeah. In a 4-bet pot, folding top trips, it's a value beater. He can also have ace-king. I'm just not folding here. I don't think so. No, definitely not folding. Another cooler. I don't even want to talk about that one. I think it's super standard post flop. I don't think there's much to say. I'd rather save our time for hands that are a bit more interesting, which this isn't. I mean, you're definitely running bad this week, right? Like running kings into aces, that kind of thing. Yeah, definitely 4-bet here. So another 4-bet pot. He pots it. Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to hear what you think about a player's range who does this generally. Like, just let me know what you think this range looks like and therefore how you should play here.
This is highly polarized, his range, so I don't want to raise into that range.
Okay, let's stop here. So the reason I'm going to stop you is that your first thought is completely wrong, and therefore if we go any further, we're going to be going down the wrong path. Who is this player?
This player is a fishy player.
And I don't even need you to look that up for me, do I? Because I can see that from anyone who donks 38 big blinds into 28 big blinds is a really, really fishy player.
He also 3-bet, min 3-bet, so.
He's a complete recreational, yeah? So a complete recreational, when they do this, will usually have jacks or 10s or 9s or queens. And sometimes something like 7s or 6s or a flush draw. Is that a polarized range?
No, I guess it's not. Yeah.
It's not at all. So maybe in game theory terms, if you take an absurd play like this, you're meant to have a really polarized range. But this is anything but a polarized range. So why do you think you're saying this is a polarized range? Let's try and establish
just because I'm used to seeing big bet polarized. That's
okay. So this is something I do a lot in chess when I'm learning chess, and sometimes I compare like my experiences learning a game I'm less good at with like my students' experiences of learning poker, right? A game that they're less good at than I am, and I can make sense of it that way. Because sometimes in chess, what I do is I say, oh, here's X pattern, and then blindly just evaluate something, a position based on that, without realizing that actually this is an exception and there's other circumstances that make it different. So when you have a whale at a low SPR who massively aggresses on an early street, you actually see a really merged range, really merged, and this is a shove for sure with queens, jam, 100%. The trouble with calling is that there aren't going to be many low equity draws in villain's range, right? There's not going to be like queen jack of spades here, really. You block it in for one, but it's just not going to be there. So with the queens that unblock the flush draw and backdoor, and most of villain's hands are things like 8, 7, 6s, 9s, you may as well just jam here. There's really no reason to slow play against such a merged range, because the problem is, if villain has jacks and a deuce rolls off on the turn, you're not going to make the rest of that money. If a 6 rolls off, if a 7 rolls off, it's going to get really hard for you to extract. So extract now if you think your opponent's range is really mergy. We want to fast play our hands against really merged ranges and slow play our hands against more polarized ranges. So absolutely mandatory shove here. Oh, I need to show results. Yeah, I mean, running into a set here is just like absolutely abominably unlucky, like against such a maniac player. I mean, what can you do, you know?
3-bet pre. I didn't see sets when he I know it was a min 3-bet, but
what if you did see sets? What if you thought he could have sets? Would it change anything?
No, probably not.
No, it wouldn't, right? So let's not even go down that road. Let's not be like, well, I did fine because I didn't think he could have a set. Let's say he can maybe have some sets, but we don't give a shit because his range is just that wide and that weak and that merged. So the only thing you did wrong here was not fast playing quickly enough on a really mergy depolarized board against a really mergy depolarized range. Nice, good job. Okay, most of these are not really your fault, by the way. I mean, yeah, this just isn't fair. This is the start of our YouTube series. We're meant to be running good. We're meant to be making it look like my coaching's fixing you, and we're getting things like this happening. What can you do?
I can talk through this hand a little bit because this was yesterday and I remember it well. So the cutoff limped and I ISO'd. I had been ISOing this guy. He was limping 70% of pots. The small blind is a reg, and I think at this point I'd probably ISO'd the last 5 opens of the cutoff.
Right.
So when he 3-bet me, I felt that he was to some degree he was light. He had a wide 3-betting range. It's a big sizing, but I felt he would be wide here, and I felt that there was a lot of dead money in the pot here, and I shoved.
Who is this player?
Who's which player?
The small blind.
The small blind is a reg. Is an aggressive reg.
So one thing I would say is that the last 4 times that you have 3-bet this player, you've ISO'd this player.
I've ISO'd his limp, so I've raised 4 on his limp.
So this player doesn't need to even be aware of that. If they're multi-tabling, I wouldn't even. Would you notice if you were player A, would you notice a pattern like player B raising player C like a few times? Would you notice that?
I should. I only play 1 or 2 tables, so I don't multi-table. So
I don't think you should notice it. I think if you notice that and you make a big deal out of that, you're massively overreacting to a really small sample. Like when a fish limps, you're meant to have like a 30% open, like ISO range maybe on the button. That's a lot of hands. It's really easy for you to just pick up one of those hands a few times in a row. I'm not sold on the thought process that this player is wider than normal necessarily. Maybe sometimes, but I think of a pool of 1,000 regs, only some of them are going to notice that and then adapt to it in a major way. I really don't think people are changing their pre-flop game plan hugely based on the fact that you happen to have isolated a different opponent a couple of times recently. I think this is a bad habit of yours to really overreact to these sorts of things. Shoving ace queen, I don't know the base EV of this play. There is a lot of dead money. It's probably not horrendous. I think it's probably not that bad, and it wouldn't take that much of a swing to make this okay, but I'd suspect that calling is better, probably.
I just felt, I just didn't like.
No, you didn't like calling because you don't want to make decisions
and this was
later,
making
right?
life easier. It was
Exactly. You don't want to make decisions. You can't be a good poker player if you don't want to make decisions. You have to make decisions to be a good poker player. Yeah?
Yeah.
So what we're essentially saying is that Jam probably has a base EV that's all right. It's probably positive because this player is just throwing out money to die. Basically, he's just like throwing out money. Maybe Jam is actually fine. Maybe it's even the best line. I don't know. And I'm not sure enough to really say that like calling is definitely better. But calling is definitely fine because you're getting 3-1. You have a lot of equity. You're in position. And you have a skill edge on a player that you're in position against. And you're going to get a lot of transparency and information. You'll be able to see what this player has effectively, right? They're going to play very face up here. So I think you're massively underrating call. And there's some resistance you're experiencing for calling that should not be there. It shouldn't. And there's way too much fighty stuff going on in your brain. There's way too much like, this macho reg's doing this to me because I was being macho, now he's re-machoing me, so now I need to over-macho him. And like, yeah, maybe shove is okay. Maybe if you're right about that, read shove is the best play. But I don't think any of that's actually going on. I think it's going on in your head.
And it wasn't in a macho way. I just felt he was wider. He was wider than standard, that's all. It wasn't like I'm going to get him. It wasn't any of that. I just thought that there's a degree of dead money in this pot.
Sure.
Yeah, I didn't like call. I felt, and maybe offsuit. I don't like playing offsuit big cards out of position, but maybe in position it's a better idea to, especially with the weaker.
Yeah, it's also a really late configuration, right? Like button against small blind 3-bet. Like you can flat this without this weaker player being there, so you can of course flat it with them being there. You can flat ace queen on the button to a normal 3-bet. While this makes jamming more tempting now with the dead money, it doesn't make calling bad, because this range is probably way too weak and wide and you have position on it and it's making mistakes, so it's probably still fine. I guess when I say macho way, yeah, you've probably got me there, like I'm being a little bit too harsh on you, but also I don't necessarily mean you're having like some conscious rhetoric with yourself that you're gonna like smash him and stuff like that. I just think that you're very wired to be like that, be competitive like that, and like not let people away with bluffing you. We talked about that last week, and I just wonder how much of that I don't want him to be bluffing me because he's reacting. I think you do feel more exposed when you've just been aggressive, and you are quite quick to feel threatened by this stuff, and it might not be that's what's going on in this hand, but it's certainly consistent with the pattern we discussed last time. So I'd like you to be aware of it. Okay. I mean, it's just so unfortunate. Like, I actually think your shove it, like, I think the more I think about this, with this player having such a wide range, like, if he's really bad, I think the shove is actually good. It's just that you shouldn't, like, dismiss call so strongly. I don't know. I think in game theory, like, shove is maybe, like, slightly too wide. Maybe it's not. But I think in practice, yeah, if the wider and weaker this guy is, the better, right, for shoving. It's just gonna get better and better.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's really unfortunate, like, for the most part in this session. All is good. Yeah, I think bet is fine here. And obviously we're calling. How do we lose this time? Okay.
Yeah, you had a big draw, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we really have been stacked a lot of times in this stretch without really doing that much wrong.
From ahead. I mean, we're being stacked from being ahead a lot.
Yeah. And that doesn't even matter. Like, even if we run kings into aces and we're behind, that's still unlucky, right? We're being unlucky. Whatever way you look at it, whether we're ahead pre-flop or not, whether it's all in EV that's suffering or whether it's just like the amount of times we get coolered, you know, that both are happening. Yeah. All right. So flop, we go three-way here. Okay. We decide to raise against the lead. Then calls. We raise the turn. Just kind of like candy from a baby hand against the fish. Snap call river. Yeah, I mean, these aren't even close, you know? These aren't really remotely close like these last few. This is a bit more interesting. Thought process. So who is villain? Let's start with that.
I hadn't played enough hands, just 8 hands.
Okay.
But the 3 big blind open felt that this is a weaker player and a short stack. So.
Yep, definitely a weaker player. What is the range of a weaker player for min 4-betting in this spot generally?
I think it's strong.
What does theory say you should do with ace queen off when you get 4-bet big blind against cutoff?
Probably fold.
Mm-hmm. What do you think in practice? Which way should you deviate from that baseline of probably fold? Should you deviate towards definitely fold or towards possibly go all in?
Deviate versus GTO against a fish. Probably call more than go all in, because go all in.
Right, but why are we moving towards not folding? Why are we leaving folding? If you're saying he's tighter than GTO, why would you move away from folding? If he's tighter, it's more of a fold, no?
Yeah.
So which way should we move from GTO, which says probably fold?
Definitely fold.
Definitely fold. Where do you think that comes from when I ask you that question? And there's a clear inconsistency in your thinking. There's a clear logical contradiction there, I would say. If you think the range is tighter than it should be, and you know that it's a fold in GTO, how have we ended up at this decision?
I think I'm probably not thinking clearly enough in game. That's the issue. So I'm not seeing the min 4-bet from a fish as tighter than normal. I may be seeing it as more of could be a wider range.
So I've seen this leak a lot in other students too, and I think it comes down to correct me if I'm wrong, but it usually comes down to the arbitrary disrespect of other players. Like he's a fish, he doesn't know what he's doing, I can now take liberties or whatever, and they could have anything. But that they could have anything thing is more true when they limp call, when they donk one big blind, when they flat the big blind, not when they 4-bet you. It's about spot recognition. This is the spot where fish will be, they'll have the value hands that a reg has. Sure, ace king, queens, aces, kings, more towards the top of that. Yeah. What they won't have is ace 4 suited. And for you to move towards jamming this, they need to be closer to over bluffing, not under bluffing, but they're actually under bluffing. So
could they have hands? I haven't looked and I can't remember, to be honest, what they have, but could they have pocket pairs doing this below 10s, 9s, 8s?
It's not impossible, and could they is a dangerous question. Yeah. You should ask really how often, and the answer is negligibly, not often enough for it to give you a significant EV boost. I mean, one, you're behind those hands, you're dog to 10s, right? That's one thing to point out. But secondly, and that's okay, 10s doesn't, if they have 10s a lot, it does improve your equity because it means they have aces or kings less often. But the nail in the coffin here for jamming is that they're not bluffing and they're never folding. There's no fold equity. Ace queen is a mistake to jam here in GTO, even with the fold equity that comes from them bluffing with king jack or ace 4. Yeah. When you remove that, what you have here, unfortunately, is a blunder. Yeah, exactly. So, but one blunder out of 12 stackings is not, okay, a couple other ones were maybe debatable, but this is the first one that's really unacceptable, that you need to go away and say, okay, what I've missed here is a huge issue that I should just resolve as quickly as possible.
Yeah,
because this is just what you're going to see a lot. And unwillingness, or just not unwillingness, but just forgetting or just it not being at the forefront of your mind to prescribe a range to this player accurately given the line they've taken. Not just oh, it's a fish, you can have anything, but really looking at the line they've taken and asking, what does that mean from that player type?
I wasn't tuned into that at all. So
exactly.
I mean, I've never considered min 4-bets from fish as being that, so that's a learning. So
yeah, I mean, you have to remember that 4-bet bluffing it's just not an attractive play for a recreational player to ever make. They don't even, it's not really on their radar, you know? If you watch like high stakes poker and you watch, you know, some of these stream games with recreational players on them, say you watch like some Hustle Live or some Live at the Bike or something, they have like a couple of recreational players on there. 4-bet bluffs are just, they're just not happening. You know, people calling 3-bets too wide, but they're not clicking it back like that with 80 big blinds with like 10s or King Jack suited. Not really, not very often, not often enough to matter. Okay. I think with fish in the pot, betting the nut flush draw top pair is a preference I have here. I think you can check in theory, but I think betting here is good.
This might be a polarization error. I mark this and...
Let's define polarization error for the audience and also just to keep you on your toes.
Betting the middle of my range, and I was focused more on the obviously the nut flush here than I was on the ace X. I mean, if this is ace 5 of clubs, I never bet it.
Ace 5 of spades is closer to a bet than ace 5 of clubs because it's closer to a value bet. This is never a bluff. You didn't think you were bluffing in game?
No.
Okay. Did you define a reason for the bet, or did you just make it because you saw lots of good stuff?
I felt I wanted to get the stack in if I hit the nut flush. This player was calling a lot, so I just...
So how often do you make the nut flush?
20% or so.
So why are we tailoring our whole line to 20% of the game tree?
It's a mistake.
So there's a few problems with this. One is that the 8 is a really unfavorable card that means you have to be more careful with your value bets. Your hand strength of 1 pair, which is your made hand strength currently. I know you have flush draw outs and they do help to give you more equity. We shouldn't disregard them entirely. But on a turn like an 8, where your opponent makes way more 2 pair, way more straight draws, straights, etc., mainly the straights and 2 pair and set side of things, that card is going to mean that you need a higher value threshold than normal, and you've already bet the flop into 2 people. And if you bet the turn here and get shoved on, it's fairly awful, yeah? Like, you're going to be a dog, you have to call, of course. And you don't want to be investing your whole stack here at this point in the hand when you can check and, you know, just navigate the river. Another good thing here is you'll be able to navigate river very easily in position against a weak player. So yeah, I do hate the bet. I think it's like close in like a button versus big blind dry board heads up pot, but not on this turn multi-way in these positions. It's too thin in this context. I agree with your assessment of polarization error.
I hated it the minute I made it.
Yeah. Okay, so that's good.
So at least I felt like I caught it. I said, shit, that's too. I should have checked here, and I caught myself in game after I bet it.
That's good. So it means that like your old brain is still running the show, but your new learning educated brain is coming in faster. Not quite fast enough, but it's coming in faster now, and eventually you'll eliminate these polarization errors more and more.
And then he shows. Yeah.
You get what you ask for sometimes, and you have to call, and it's going to suck. And if he wasn't allowed to shove the turn, I'd be okay with the value bet. I'd be like, it's thin, but I'm on board with it. But because he is allowed to shove the turn, those branches further wreck your EV here of betting. You reopen. So be very careful in this spot. Be very, very careful. Okay, we've been going for about 30 minutes. Let's make this the last hand of this video. And then what we're going to do is we're going to record another one back to back. We're going to look at a different type of spot in the next episode, which will come out a week from when you guys watch this. So open to 3 big blinds, call on the button, squeeze. Yeah, you can squeeze, you can call, it doesn't really matter. N8-6. We start with a check. I don't want to dive into flop too much here. I will say that you can bet small, you can bet big, or you can check here. I don't really think it's that important, but you just want to make sure you understand what your strategy is. I would use probably a large bet here if I did bet, but I would check a lot on this texture against under the gun. I think this is a fairly neutralizing texture where we don't want to be going nuts. 10-8-6, 9 sets possible here. Pocket pairs have gutter. Much higher equity board for villain than normal in a 3-bet pot, so doing a lot of checking is good. Check call is the only play. It'd be a polarization error to check raise at this stack depth, right, with this hand. Okay, river spot, interesting node, off you go. Thought process.
I felt that I wanted to check mostly here on this card.
Sorry, what do you mean by mostly? You mean with your hand or your range? I'm not clear.
Sorry, I'm talking about my hand now.
So you think you want to mix bet and check, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Do you think bet and check have the same EV, is that what you're saying?
I feel that bet and check might have the same EV, yeah.
Are you leaning towards...
I prefer to check. I'm leaning towards
Okay,
check.
so don't ever bet. If you don't know that they have the same EV and you're actually very hazy on that matter, but you know that check is fine, you should never be betting here. I just made a video that... Have they watched that yet? No, they've not watched that yet. You guys are going to see a video on this. in 3 days' time on Friday, the 16th of September. And it's going to be called How to Use an RNG in Poker. And this is a spot where we do not use an RNG because you have established that check is fine and that bet might be fine and might not be fine. Is that fair?
Yeah.
So the one that might not be fine doesn't get rolled in because if you're wrong about it being fine, it's a disaster. And I actually think if you bet here, it's a disaster if you bet anything more than about quarter pot. I mean, your hand is very marginal. You probably have like 50% equity, 55% equity. You could bet 10% pot with that out of position if you want to block 10% pot, maybe. But like, well, it's so dicey to go anything bigger than that here because you are your polarization error territory as soon as you do that. Because your equity can't be very high here. Can't be that much more than 50-60%.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I checked. So
good. But that's a very sloppy habit, right? If you don't mind me saying, to say mostly bet, mostly check. Either there's two things that can happen here when a student says this. One, it's a cop out and the student is just hedging their bets with their commentary. Not healthy, but maybe you'd never bet in game, at least there's that. Or two, you're actually mixing spots you shouldn't be mixing where you're not sure the EVs are equal. So have a think about which one it is. Is it both? Is it a little bit of one, a little bit of the other? And fix it. Okay, I'm so glad this spot came up. This is such a good example of a spot we've been looking at where we're on the river and we have to figure out where we are. We have to like figure out how we got here. We have to look at our hand strength. Let me start with the first question, which is, do you beat any value bets / merges here? What do you think? Or do you have a bluff catcher? Do you have a hand that only beats bluffs? We're going to start with that key question.
I think for that sizing, I probably have a bluff catcher, and I didn't think that in game.
Okay, so that's a very important point then. I agree with you. This is 100% a bluff catcher, unless villain is insane, which they may be. And if they're insane, like, okay, maybe we have to make like a really sad call here. But if we have a bluff catcher with this two pair, which I think we do, because I think villain's value range here is like minimum set, minimum, maybe just straights and flushes. So if this is a bluff catcher, you know, we need to establish that first and foremost, and then we can start thinking about whether the spot is under bluffed or over bluffed. And, you know, I would start thinking about that absolutely at this point. But if we start off by saying I have a value beater, we're just completely on the wrong track and we're never going to have the right thought process. Here's another question then. Did you think it was a value beater because you wanted to think it was a value beater and it was convenient for proving desires, or was it just a misjudgment, technical misjudgment?
I think it was a misjudgment after the turn check.
Okay.
That's what I felt after the turn check, and then a river two pair I thought might be ahead of something here.
Well, it might be ahead of something, but not something that bets.
Ace 6, basically.
Yeah, but these are just so far-fetched, right? Like, they're opening under the gun, they're calling 3-bet, they're betting flop, they're value betting river. Like, we're in a kind of dreamland now to run into these, I think. Yeah. I mean, it could happen, but it's astronomically unlikely for sure. What factor have you underappreciated here, maybe, then, that would have allowed you to see that this is just a hand that beats bluffs?
I think the board and the...
Yes.
I think the board, the 4 to a straight and the flush.
Yeah.
And I know it clicked that there was a flush, but I thought it's an ace. So an ace takes out a lot of the flushes from his range. So, you know, that my thought process was probably muddled here. And I think I was probably surprised by the sizing and, you know, why so big?
Yeah, I mean, why so big is just absurd because it's half pot. It's not even big at all. Is a crazy thought to have. Some of your thoughts are like, honestly, rogue thoughts that are going to make it impossible for you to become a winning player. And if they don't get destroyed and exterminated, they're going to wreck you forever. That might sound like I'm scaremongering or whatever. I'm like being the fucking media in the UK, but that's not what I'm trying to be, you know? I'm not trying to be those tabloids. Well, I am. I'm trying to give you a headline that scares you. But if you open up the paper and read the article about what these do to you, you will see that actually they will be debilitating completely. They're not just like scaremongering headlines. They have substance as well. So yeah, basically to see this as a value beater is misappropriating the board texture. It's misappropriating how we got here. The fact that you've called a flop bet already, so you've filtered your range, and you know, in GTO your villain understands that, and that's why you can't value bet the river, because you don't have a strong enough hand to do that. If you had a value beater here, we'd be much closer to actually value betting the river. But that makes sense because you were a bit more torn on that than I was. I was very adamant you shouldn't bet river, and you were closer to it, so that makes sense. Okay, so what we need to do to fix this is we need to just track the hand better, track the texture, just try and get experience putting all of that together and consciously thinking about those factors, because they affect the relative hand strength of your hand and whether it's a bluff catcher or value beater. Next, If this is a bluff catcher, obviously we weren't going to get there in game because we had the wrong judgment there. But if we have got the judgment right that this is a bluff catcher, we need to then assess whether we think this spot is over bluffed or under bluffed. And again, tracing the action sequence, the line, the board, how would your feelings go on that, whether this is over bluffed or under bluffed in reality?
I think it's probably under bluffed.
Why?
Because it's 4 to a straight and a flush on board. So the villain has filtered their range a lot and therefore has a lot of, has showdown. I think their entire range probably has showdown value.
Well, hang on. Could they not have bet the flop with like Queen Jack of clubs?
Yeah.
So they don't always have showdown value. They do. They've not called a bet. They've just made a bet. They do have natural bluffs available here. Some. But my concern is how combinatorically sparse those hands are. Like, what does he need to have air? There's a 10 out there. There's an ace out there now. There's a flush. There's 4 to a straight. So I think you're on the right lines here. And to have air, villain basically has to have exactly Queen Jack suited or King Jack suited or King Queen suited. Now, there are quite a lot of those hands. There's like 9 combos of those, but there are also quite a lot of value hands in such a node where there's like set straights, flushes, that kind of thing. So I think you shouldn't say that villain always has showdown value here. That's not true because villain took a polarized flop line. They bet the flop. Then they checked. There's still air. That's an air heavy. Usually in theory, bet and then check is more air heavy. So they do definitely still have air on the river here, and you do beat air. So it's not clear to me that this is a fold. I think call here is okay. And the reason for that is that although there are lots of value combos here, you could also run into like King Queen and King Jack and Queen Jack now that bet flop and is now betting turn. I'm not sure. It might be like, I don't think this is a massively winning call or anything, but we only need to win 25%. We only need villain to be bluffing one of those hands like 25% of the time here. And I think that's reasonable. So I think call is all right here, but it's because you have a bluff catcher for good pot odds and it's not clear to me this is an underbluffed spot. Okay. Underbluffed. What does underbluffed mean when we're facing a half pot size bet? What do you think underbluffed means there?
They have to be bluffing less than 25%.
Exactly. So that's actually not so clear because if he just has 1 in 4 bluffs here, then he's actually GTO frequency wise. And if he has like 33% of his range is a bluff here, he's over bluffing. We need to make sure we ask ourselves how often we're wanting to win here. So I don't hate this call at all, even though it looks grim. Because of the pot odds and because of the prevalence of air, because he has bet, flop, and check turn, and people are quite bad at checking sets and straights on the turn here.
Yeah, I don't think 9s in my pool check with the flush draw out there on the wet board. I don't think a 9 will.
Exactly. So I think this may even be overbluffed. I think this may be overbluffed, and I think we need to. It's hard to see that. It's an advanced thing to get to the conclusion that this could be overbluffed, but I do think it could be because I think the value range is not very good at getting here after checking turn. There are some flushes, sure. There's maybe some straights, but I don't think very many at all. And then there's maybe some sets that go for this value bet, but yeah, you have a bluff catcher. But you can call, maybe this isn't a bad call, but certainly thinking you have a value beater here, it shows that again, your relative hand strength is way off. And what we're going to do in the next session is actually focus on your relative hand strength in a bunch of spots that progress through to the river. And I'm going to get you to like tier your hand, grade your hand, tell me where it fits against villain's range, and we're going to really work on relative hand strength in the next session because I think it's a big bugbear and it's very central to the development. Any final thoughts today? How's today's session left you feeling?
Pretty good. I mean, I think I ran into a lot here, but I've got some really good pointers that are new to me, so I'm really happy with how that went.
Great. Let's keep our chin up here. We have ran very badly this week. There's no doubt about that. That's not your fault, but there are a lot of improvements to be made. Let's continue our quest from losing to cruising. See you guys next time.